Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Podstash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. Check out thedankpodstash.com to find every episode of the Dank Podstash, links to support the show via our BitBacker and Patreon, Dank Podstash merchandise, and much more. If you'd like to advertise on the Dank Podstash, email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com.
Zombie presidents, what anarchy! Zombie presidents!
Hey, this is your host, NonVotingNick. Before we jump into today's show, let me bring you a special offer from my friend Shane Radliff over at Liberty Under Attack Publications. Shane has an offer for Dank Podstash listeners to take 10% off your order by using coupon code DANK10. Just go to libertyunderattack.com. Shane has books focusing on self-liberation, freedom strategies, solutions, and more. His current books are #Agora, Second Realm Book on Strategy, Ben Stone's Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage, and Shane's very own Vanu, A Strategy for Self-Liberation, among others. He also offers assistance to new authors throughout the publishing process, editing, proofreading, formatting for Kindle and paperback, and full-service audiobook productions. That's Liberty Under Attack Publications. Share your story, find your freedom. I'd also like to give a shout-out to Bad Moon Hemp. Check out badmoonhemp.wordpress.com. Bad Moon Hemp is your one-stop shop for all your handmade hemp needs. I use Bad Moon Hemp's beard oil and beard balm. It's awesome stuff. Be sure to check them out and enjoy the show. Welcome, fellow enemies of the state, to episode 46 of Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. I'm your host, NonVotingNick, and today I'm joined by Dan Hodor. What's up, man?
How's it going?
It's going good. Excited to talk to you. Fan of Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable Discussion. Yeah. That's a great show. Everybody should check that out too.
Oh yeah,
gotta love it. So tell us about you, Path to Anarchy, thoughts on anarchy, stuff related to you and anarchy.
All right. Well, my name's Dan Hodor, and I am a anarchist. We're going to treat this like Anarchist Anonymous. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. I found anarchy through, kind of going from one side of the political spectrum to the other and then completely dropping out of it. So, I started out like kind of anti-war, well, pretty much anti-war under the Bush administration after we invaded Iraq after 9/11 and everything. And my dad was Special Forces of Vietnam, so that had a big impact on my views on war and, what it did to people that actually served in the military. Mm-hmm. So, I never really subscribed to either political party. Like, I never considered myself a Democrat or a Republican, but I was always like, on principle, I was always kind of like sided with whoever was against war. So in that sense, I kind of like, sided with the Democrat views on things like on that side, like in terms of anti-war, because, they were way different back there in the Bush administration than, they are now, because the Overton window has shifted so hard to the left. Mm-hmm. That it's Democrats are like essentially communists now. So I was pretty much considered myself left-leaning at that time, and then Obama came into office, and then I saw that there was really no difference between either party, and that they were both war parties, two wings of the same vulture, essentially feasting off the carcass that used to be America. Mm-hmm. And then I found Ron Paul in 2012, and it was like a very short trip from being like libertarian to, kind of adopting anarchist principles and trying to apply them in like every aspect of my life, whether it's being apolitical, I guess, mm-hmm. to, interpersonal relationships with people and, having voluntary interactions and, making sure that, people consent to, interactions and things like that. So, I mean, it, as like a philosophy, I I would say I subscribe to anarchism because of the fact that, like, I'm big on self-governance and self-mastery, and I don't view anarchism as like a means to um, being irresponsible. I think it's like of the utmost importance that people be completely responsible for all their actions and hold themselves accountable and be accountable. Because if you want a free society, it's like you can't just have a whole bunch of people running around being completely irresponsible, because then you end up treading on other people's rights. So people are really only free to the extent of their own self-mastery. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Definitely agree with that.
So when it comes to the whole label of anarchist, I would say that I don't necessarily call myself an anarchist. Like, I don't like run around telling people, hey, I'm an anarchist, this, that, and the other thing. I just, I'm just me, essentially, because I have so many like varying different views all over the place that it's kind of hard to put it into one box. And I also don't like to label myself so that people can throw me in a box and then just disregard everything I say like they already know that, like, what I already, or like they already know what I believe, pretty much. Because it's easy for people to do that. You know what I mean? If you're right wing or left wing or whatever, people just assume that you believe a certain way and then that's it, and they're done with you and they don't want to hear anything else you have to say.
Yeah.
So, and like I definitely, like, when I'm trying to open other people's eyes that, like, are still stuck in like the political matrix, I definitely don't tell them I'm an anarchist, because it's like that kind of sets off like a warning alarm system for them, because they've been so indoctrinated with the term that they don't really understand what it means. They think you want like chaos and riots in the streets and all the madness that they've been indoctrinated to believe it comes along with. So when it comes to stuff like that, I usually just like approach people with a lot of questions. Like, I'll ask them, would you rather be forced to pay taxes, or would you rather purchase like almost like a subscription plan within your community for things that you see are necessary, like paramedics, roads, stuff like that. Like, it could be done without a extortionist middleman, aka government. So if you don't mention anarchy, a lot of people will actually agree with what you're like espousing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Believe it or not, because they don't, what I mean, they don't have that whole like preconceived notion to trip them up. So it's like you just kind of lead them down the path with questioning, and then, like, at the end you're like, oh, hey, that's like pretty much voluntarism that I just described to you.
For sure, yeah. I think responsibility for yourself, self-mastery, and just really only caring about your, like, what you're able to control of yourself is important. Doing the best that you can do as far as who you are. And it seems like so much gets lost in the weeds lately with all the different anarcho hyphens, and I find myself coming back just to the root meaning of the word, without rulers, without masters, and going from there. Because if you follow that logically, it's a pretty easy path.
Oh yeah, it's totally like meat and potatoes if you don't like make it all convoluted and shit with like the hyphenations. Like that's why Karl Hess is like one of my favorite anarchists, because he's like he wrote anarchism without hyphens, where he like pretty much didn't attach anything to it in terms of like an economic ideology or whatever, because that's usually what the subsets seem to be.
Yeah.
Well, it's either that or like egoism or individualist or whatever. But I think that a lot of things can be incorporated into that, in terms of like you can be an individualist and like maintain your individuality, but at times I feel, and there's a lot of anarchists that are like so hardcore anti-collectivism that they don't see the benefits of it in terms of like there's strength in numbers, and like as long as it's consensual and voluntary, I don't see an issue with like people like kind of banding together for mutual aid and mutual defense.
For sure.
Which to me that would be like almost a micronation, but without like the state. It would just be like kind of a common agreed upon like set of values that everybody kind of naturally shares. And I kind of see things going that way if there was ever a collapse of like government, and people had to resort to, you know, being self-reliant, because people want order naturally, and they want, like, you know, a sense of security and safety, especially if they have children. So it's like, you know, people are going to band together to keep their communities safe from people, like, you know, coming in and trying to, you know, take advantage of the situation. Because it's like, if it's every man for himself, and it's like, you know, well, I won't worry about it unless it's on my property. And then it's like, well, what do you do then if, you know, other people decide to collectivize and, you know, surround your property? Then you're pretty much fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people, I kind of hold a negative view on if there was a collapse. I think people would reset government pretty quickly, but I do have the hope that if people were left long enough to figure everything out and to deal with everyday situations and make things work semi-efficiently again, probably even more efficiently, they would find how much easier it is and more efficient when they're doing it themselves. And then when some asshole comes around saying, hey, we're restarting the government, you need to give us money, I hope that they would say, nah, man, we're good. And it's like seeing the image that always comes to my mind is, I think somewhere in Asia, probably China or something, you see the traffic lights go out and people just handle it. They just drive, no accidents or anything, fewer accidents than when there's traffic lights and these big multi-lane intersections and things like that. And just something simple like that can spread ripples, and people will take responsibility for the situation and make it happen. And yeah, like you were saying, no man's an island. You can be an individualist all you want, but like where I'm at, I'm on 5 acres and there's 5, 10, 20 acre parcels everywhere around. And if it was just us in this kind of neighborhood looking out for each other, and we were looking out for ourselves, and there was hostile whatever out there, forces, people, gangs, whatnot, and we weren't looking out for each other's property, and one person's property gets taken, well, now the people we don't want taking our property have a foothold. And so it only benefits people to group together. It's natural too.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what I always try to explain to, you know, I've had arguments with anarchists over this, because, you know, they tend to be hyper individualist to a point where they're like atomized, and it like almost serves as like a disadvantage for them, because they can't see like the positives that come out of, like, you know, collectively banding together for mutual aid, mutual defense. Because they want to like stick to their principles so hard that they end up becoming like purists. And it's like, well, you're not recognizing your blind spots, because historically speaking, people aren't going to like respect somebody just being isolated and, you know, just being like, well, I'm just going to look out for my own, fuck everybody else.
Sure. And I think people get way too caught up in how to handle people doing things they don't like within their community, where the easiest answer is disassociation. You know, you don't need to worry about enforcing what your morals or ideals onto somebody else and what they do. If you don't like what they do, don't be a part of their group. It's that easy. Don't associate with them.
Yep. Yeah, so that's how always been my stance too. And that's why, like, if it was a free society, I think that things like abhorrent shit, like, you know, like rape and, you know, pedophilia and things like that, you know, things that are pretty prevalent in the news lately, and like, you know, people's eyes are becoming open to it, that it's a reality, and there are monsters out there that, you know, don't think anything like you or I.
Yeah.
I think that things like that would get dealt with because it's a non-consensual thing, and, you know, any decent human being wouldn't stand for it.
Yep.
And it would justice would get doled out like if you put a pedophile and general population in a prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like that's the only place that it seems to be true justice gets served.
Kind of funny, yeah.
They don't
have an oxymoron. That's an interesting.
Ironic.
It's an interesting conversation when you bring in violations against an individual into a community dynamic. And people ask, well, how would you handle murder? How would you handle rape and things like that? And a lot of people aren't satisfied with my answer. And I think people, if there's a crime committed against somebody, if they're still alive, it's up to them to figure out what they want to be, you know, to be compensated for what happened to them. And if it's a murder, then it's up to the surviving family or whoever's handling it after to figure out. And if there's no one there, the community to decide what happens with that person. Do they want them in that community still? I think it's dangerous when you start handing over, capital punishment, the extremes of punishment to groupthink.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, because then it devolves to a mob mentality, and then when it becomes a mob mentality, then people kind of lose their sense of responsibility as an individual. Is like Aldous Huxley talked about that, it's called like herd poisoning. Like when people get in groups, they kind of lose their sense of individuality and personal responsibility to the group, because they kind of feel like they're masked, like they're disguised, like they could get away with things morally that they otherwise wouldn't do on their own.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because there's been tests. I can't remember I think it was shocking other people. They had tests where people had a button and a dial to.
Yeah, Milgram experiment.
Yeah, exactly. And people would shock people more harshly when they were anonymous. And it's funny because that same idea falls into mob mentality, even though not everyone has their faces covered in every mob. You kind of get swept up into the anonymity of the crowd, which is interesting.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into human psychology that people don't necessarily take into account, and that's like why I try to approach anarchism from like a more like philosophical, psychological perspective, in terms of like evaluating the principles and like what it stands for. It's not so much like a straight on like gospel or like religion for me. It's more of like a foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Well, yeah. If you value the individual, then you have to build your own foundation, and you can't build someone else's for them. They have to do that. So, that's definitely a good way to look at it. And economics gets you lost in the weeds as well. Not that maybe it's a good thing to know, but there's no free market to practice these in right now. So why the hell are we fighting over it?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, and people kind of get they do get like swept up in that hardcore, because it's like each camp like has to defend their ideology, their economic outlook. Like that's like all that there can be. Like I don't necessarily see communists functioning well with anybody else. Like if they wanted to have their own like autonomous zone kind of thing to operate their own system, then that's fine, as long as they leave everybody else alone. Not that I'm a fan of communists or I condone it, but I think that the way that they view things is antithetical to like anybody else's outlook, because they don't respect private property, which means they don't respect the individual, which means that you're essentially a slave to the group.
Yeah. Well, like you're saying,
So
I mean,
it's dangerous.
I don't care what people do as long as they're not hurting anybody else. Have whatever anarcho hyphen or economic group that you want to have, but the thing that really bugs me is when people become fortune or they can see into the future all of a sudden, and they're like, well, eventually these commies are going to attack us, so we got to get them first. It's like, well, you don't know that.
Yeah. I mean, historically speaking, they have a tendency to, but I've talked to some that are like reasonable, rational people, and like they just they want like collective ownership of stuff, and it's like it's fine, like what I mean. Like if somebody wanted to have like a horizontally owned business where it was like a co-op or something, it's functioning within a free market system, and there's like competition going on with like people that are entrepreneurs and everything else that like independently own, I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? It's like as long as no one's forcing anybody to do anything else, it's like I don't see a problem like with it, and why you can't function like side by side. I mean, it kind of already does, even though the market's controlled.
Right.
But there's co-ops and there's independently owned stuff, and it'll all function side by side. I mean, sometimes there's plenty of examples that like people try to run businesses on like a communist model, and it just completely deteriorated and fell apart.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily a communist model, but probably the most entertaining story of a badly modeled business is I think it was like a sandwich shop that was charging men a privilege tax. That was so fucking funny. Just goes straight under from lack of business.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's
Oh,
like, I mean, not to get too into the economic side of things, but like, you know, I'm I don't know. I guess if I had to label myself anything, I'm like, I'm pro entrepreneurship because I don't like to say I'm a capitalist because people kind of tend to associate that with big business and, you know, corporate ownership, which in reality that wouldn't exist if the state didn't exist because the state licenses corporations and, you know, gives them limited liability and taxpayer subsidies. So it's like without the state, companies would all have to function in like relatively the same way with no safety net and like, you know, susceptible to market forces. So without the state to like, you know, kind of be there to prop them up and, you know, carry them if they're failing, then I don't see how you could really grow to that size and then, you know, lobby to have the markets controlled in your favor and
yeah.
have like, you know, small business owners kind of regulated out of out of the service or product production that, you know, you're competing in. So that's what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a concern that comes up a lot is if, and it's one that I try not to get into because it really puts the conversation in a spot that I don't think we would be able to bring anarchy out of. If like people always like to say, if the state ended tomorrow, if government was gone tomorrow, it's like, well, yeah, obviously things would be shitty because we're a minority. Anarchists, even just people who are
Yeah.
responsible for themselves, are a minority. So obviously that's not going to end well. But
Oh, absolutely.
if there was some sort of collapse and the state ended tomorrow, people are afraid of the corporations taking over in place of government. And there's a couple sides to that. And either they don't have any power anymore because they're based on government money and the fiat's gone after the government falls. It's not worth anything.
Yep.
They don't have, like you said, the lobbying capabilities to drive other businesses out to get laws passed in their favor. But the problem is, if there are any businesses, like say, you know, defense industry that have stockpiles of weapons and strong weapons at that, or stockpiles of resources that are going to be valued after government currency is gone, that could be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Cause they could, I mean, potentially with the, just the power that they have alone, I could see where an issue might arise with them, like, you know, essentially establishing themselves as like kind of, I don't know, like,
It's more fucking bandit lords again, you know?
yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, like with their own like mercenary armies and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, like some like oil companies and shit already have that. Like they
Mm-hmm.
have their own like mercenary groups to operate on their behalf.
Sure.
So it's I mean, it's a tricky situation because I think that like a lot of stuff would kind of go back to more local, locally sourced things, and to operate a global supply chain would be a lot tougher if you didn't have like you know, overarching governmental systems to kind of organize that. I mean, eventually like the supply chains would, you know, reestablish themselves, but I think it would be affected in the immediate short term.
Yeah.
So people would kind of be forced to go back to like, you know, more, I wouldn't say agrarian, but just like a localized kind of old school, like depending on each other system of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And people I think would, since they would have to interact with their neighbors and whatnot, they would definitely either disassociate, like you said, or people would, you know, have a newfound respect for each other because they kind of have to. They kind of need each other in a sense.
Right.
Because like you see that kind of stuff a lot when like there's a natural disaster and like
Yeah.
people that don't even know each other are just like helping each other out. You know what I mean? Because it's just like that's kind of the human default disposition when things go bad. It's like people just, you know, good people come out of the woodwork and want to help each other because it's like, you know, they know what it's like, or you know, they think of it in terms of like, well, I wouldn't want to be in that position, so you know, I want to help this person out because you know it's just the humane thing to do.
Sure. Yeah, good people come out of the woodwork, bad people come out of the woodwork, and oftentimes they're dealt with.
Yeah.
If they're
Yep.
affecting things that people don't want affected negatively, they're dealt with. I mean, and it kind of goes out in ripples from small scale things to large scale things, like you're saying. In natural disasters, there's large groups of people that help just out of the goodness of their own heart, out of their own pockets. that help people out. There's
Yep.
think of the LA riots, the roof Koreans. I mean, they're helping themselves out, but they're also eliminating the bad people that come out of the woodworks, and they're not hurting anybody doing it.
Yeah.
And then something on the
Which benefits the other businesses in the community.
Yeah, exactly. And then something else on the topic list for today. There was a video from Hong Kong of one of the riot police attacking a woman from behind and then getting the shit kicked out of him by a bunch of people that saw it.
Nice.
He pushed into a corner and got fucked up.
Good.
And so, yeah, it happens on a lot of different scales. And that's, too, talking about corporations, they're going to have, all kinds of munitions and already have their own private armies and stuff. That's why it's important for every person, every individual to have the capability of defending themselves to that same level. So you can see in Hong Kong how fucking bad it is for them not having the same weapons as the cops. And I don't like not having the same weapons as the military or private armies and whatnot without the threat of going to jail or getting killed. And with the red flag law bullshit coming up everywhere and how they want to classify, conspiracy theorists or even Antifa as domestic terrorists, because they can stretch it from there is the thing. It doesn't have to just be people who are associated with Antifa. There's like, well, your views kind of line up with some of theirs, so you're a domestic terrorist. We're gonna come get you.
Yeah, once they get a foothold in that regard, it's like they just continue to expand the definition. Usually, like they'll leave it vague enough where, it's kind of like they can just drop everybody into the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, after 9/11, like they, with the Patriot Act and everything, it was like they left it so open-ended and vague that like it was just like, after a while, it's like, who isn't a fucking domestic terrorist in the fucking eyes of the NSA or whoever,
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say with confidence that it's the majority, but it seems like all over the world, people are getting pretty dissatisfied with government. Because there's the Yellow Vest protests, there's Hong Kong, there's Storm All the Things, all these things happening, and people are not happy with the whole idea of government, it seems like. Yep.
Well, I think the things like the Epstein case kind of are like really shedding light on how a lot of these governments are controlled. You know what I mean? It's because government is more or less just a hub for population control, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's middleman with a gun that takes your money and says, hey, I can spend it better than you can.
Yeah.
But like people are starting to realize that like this whole like blackmail through sexual blackmail is like pretty pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean that was, sexual blackmail has been around since like the inception of like the OSS, and then that became the CIA, and then it's probably even gone back even further than that with like MI6 and other intelligence agencies. So it's like it's a means of controlling people, because if you have dirt on people, like you can hold a whole entire system of corruption together. By just saying, hey, you're going to do as I tell you to do, otherwise you're going to get exposed, and then your life is over, you're ruined. It's like character assassination.
Yeah, so that's something that's been coming up a lot. What do you think the system of that is? You think it's kind of I guess pay to play, if you want in you got to do these things, and now we have dirt on you, or how do you think they work that?
Yeah, I think it is like that a lot of the time, because I mean it used to be, because the taboo thing and back in the day before it became like more like accepted and mainstream was like homosexual blackmail. Now it's diddling little kids, and it's just like keeps getting sicker and sicker. But yeah, I think it's like one of those things like if you want into the club, you have to kind of play ball and do really fucked up shit, and if you don't, then you'll either be killed or not allowed into the club, or they'll drug you and put you in bed with, like in a compromising position or something, like, and take video or pictures of you so that they have dirt on you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, they'll find a way to get to you if you're, you know, ascending the ranks or whatever, because they don't want, you know, somebody that's a free agent or, you know, a stray that could possibly be a glitch in the matrix, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just hard to stomach because there's so many people
Oh, dude,
on the
it's
supposed
disgusting.
lists, and it's like, god damn, that many people would just completely sell out their humanity for a shot at power, like, totally ruin.
Yep.
Even if we're talking about the pedophilia blackmail, it's how could someone even think, yeah, I'll do this for a shot? It's like, what the fuck? I'd rather die. I don't understand how
Yeah,
people
it's
can
sick.
take that
It's sick,
path.
dude. Yeah.
Some crazy
Yeah.
draw.
Yeah, that's like one of the things that probably enrages me more than I don't know, probably anything I can think of, because it's like, for me, the first thing you do as a society or as an individual that has any kind of, like, you know, moral grounding at all, is you protect the most innocent and defenseless among you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're the future. It's like, if you're not protecting kids, like, even if they're not your own, like, your fucking, you know, your society or, you know, your lineage or whatever, it's not going to fucking survive. Like, you know, that's where I stand on that whole thing. And it's just like, um I I realize that a lot of people have a hard time, like, not only stomaching things like, you know, like this, but uh believing that it can even exist on the
Mm-hmm.
scale that it does. Because it's like, you know, your normal average person doesn't think in terms of, like, the way these people that are in power think. You
Right.
know, it's like they think, like, you know, like, if I told somebody about it and they're like, no way, that's crazy, like, you know, that just sounds so far-fetched that, like, you know, there's no way that could be true. And it's like, well, you know, a psychopath or a sociopath doesn't think like the average person.
Right.
Like, you know, you really kind of have to step out of your own perspective and put yourself in their perspective in order to see it from, like, you know, the way they see things, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
it's fucking disgusting, man. Like, it just enrages me. And it's like, if I had a chance, I'd string all these bastards up from a fucking lamppost,
Yeah.
because they deserve it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like most people in those positions have psychopathic or sociopathic traits. So that could be
Oh
one
yeah.
draw. That's a pretty scary concept to think that the world is run by fucking psychopaths.
Mm-hmm. But usually, like, those are the people that gravitate towards positions of power, because your average person doesn't want to fucking, like, rule over other people.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to live their life and be left alone for the most part.
Right. Yeah,
It's only, like, control freaks that really want those positions.
yeah, and it's pulled the curtain back a bit with everything coming out with Epstein, and I,
Oh yeah.
I just don't see if he killed himself or if someone else killed him, whatever. It's still a move to keep the curtain at least
Mm-hmm.
partially drawn. So I think it's important. That's why I've been just pounding away at this subject, is because I think it's important to keep it in the forefront, because it's not just anarchists or quote unquote conspiracy theorists who are into this story now and who are starting to see this shit. There's a whole lot of people, for lack of a better term, normies, and it needs to
Yep.
not die. It can't be shoved to the side. This is important. I think it's a catalyst.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I mean, for me, conspiracy theories were essentially what got me into, like, you know, seeing government for what it was, and, like, you know, understanding that it's just, first of all, it's just immoral. And then secondly, like, just to understand the absolutely abhorrent, corrupt shit that they engage in is just like, wow, like, how anybody could support this is beyond me.
Yeah. Well, and they're
And
mostly
I think a lot of
anonymous.
people become, like, either small government or anti-government as a result of conspiracy theories. And I think that's why, you know, the FBI pretty much labeled, you know, conspiracy theorists as domestic terrorists, because they understand that it kind of leads you down that path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And people like to say too, well, which one is it? Are they too stupid to make a ham sandwich, to manage these conspiracies, or is it some overarching group of fucking masterminds that's too brilliant to be taken down? And they're like, you got to pick one. And it's like, well, either fucking way, it's not good. It's not something that should be
Yeah,
around.
exactly. Well, I don't know. I mean, like, it's kind of a mix of both, because I mean, you do have really incompetent people within government, but then it's like the people that are really running the show, and it's not necessarily one group. or like, even if it is like, one group, it's people within that group that don't represent the whole entire group. You know
Sure.
what I mean? So, and it's usually like a generational plan. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they play the long game. So it's like they, bring their kids up to carry out the agenda and like continue it long
Right.
after they're gone. Because it's like, it's one of those things that if you wanted to take over the world and you didn't want people to realize, and you wanted to do it through incrementalization, like, like Fabian socialists preach, you have to do it generationally, because it's like, otherwise people are going to wake up to what's going on if you do it too fast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Because people are going to notice that, like, the change, like if it's just gradual, and like, because humans have a tendency to like become acclimated to like whatever they're within. If it's like a gradual kind of change thing, like, people, even if they don't necessarily agree with it, they kind of like humans' ability to adapt is kind of used against us.
right. It's the frog in the boiling pot of water deal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but thinking about that, it's a generational process that really perks up my tinfoil hat, because I'm like, why? What's in it for the people who are who are perpetuating this, who aren't going to be here to see it come to fruition? Like, am I going down the deep rabbit holes of, yeah, they're just implanting their mind or soul or whatever into clones, and they're gonna be around for it. That's some pretty deep, crazy shit.
Oh, they've talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Ray Kurzweil, he's talked about like pretty much uploading your, consciousness to the cloud and then re-downloading it into a, Android body or whatever. And I'm like, that shit's just way far-fetched, man. But I wouldn't be surprised if they, they're working towards that.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I mean, was it the
Yeah.
neural net? I don't know a lot about it, but I think Musk is doing something, or Google, with the neural net, and that shit freaks me out.
Yep.
That's a conversation I've had before. I know that advancements in technology can be good, and it could give you access to the world of information at a thought instead of at the touch of a
Yep.
finger, but that could also separate groups a lot more massively. There's going to be a huge chasm between the people who have the money to have this right away and then deny it to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of people think, oh, well, if they release that, it's going to be to everybody. It's like, well, no, if there's people that want to control things and stay in a position of power, do you really think they're just going to allow everybody access to it?
Yeah.
Or if they do you really think that they're going to, they're not going to have like a way advanced version in comparison to what you're running?
Yeah, already do. We're probably getting the dumbed down version. Everybody that is
totally.
talks about things going on in government, they're like, yeah, there's shit that even we don't know what it is, and you shelf it, and you come back till with the next breakthrough, and then you try to figure it out again. But there's a lot of advanced shit there.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got things like DARPA that, they're involved with a lot of the shit that's like super advanced. I mean, like, there's been speculation that, like, there's pretty much a breakaway civilization that, like, is at least 50 years in advance of what we, like, what we're shown. And you gotta wonder, because it's like, when you're talking about missing trillions of dollars within government that can't be accounted for, like, just between the like DOD and HUD alone is like 21 trillion missing.
It's insane.
So where does all that money go? You know what I mean? Like, if they have $21 trillion at their disposal to like, create a breakaway civilization, what do you think that it's like?
Yeah.
I mean, plus it's like they have all kinds of shit, like, human trafficking, drug networks, you name it, they have it, in terms of running black market operations to fund, black ops and, really highly classified operations and projects. So it's like, even the stuff that's like that you can account for, a lot of that black market operations that the intelligence agencies running are all like, it's a lot of fucking money, man.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of money, and pretty scary and discouraging if you think they're 50 years ahead in technology. With how fast technology grows, how exponentially, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, they were talking about things like, mind control through, like, you know, extremely low frequency vibrations and things like through microwaves and all this stuff in like the 60s.
Yeah.
And there's like CIA documents on it that have been declassified. So it's like if they were talking about that back then, like, you know, it's now almost 2020. So
Yeah. Well,
it's like 60 years later.
That's the fucking thing that everybody always falls back into. People get called conspiracy theorists and then shit's declassified. Come to find out, oh, they weren't crazy. They're fucking right. And every new thing, you're just a conspiracy theorist. It's like when are you going to realize after how many times people have been proven correct that there might be something to it? You don't have to take everything hook, line, and sinker, but Jesus Christ, look into it a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's the dangerous thing with conspiracy theories because, like, I did a episode with Jason and what's his name from Liberty Under Attack?
Shane.
Yeah. So Shane and Jason and I did an episode, and, you know, it was based on like conspiracy theories, and he was wondering how, like, you know, it played a role or it was advantageous to, you know, investigate them in terms of kind of like setting people's minds free and cultivating a culture of like liberty. And I said that, you know, it essentially opens people's eyes to, you know, the corruption of government and what it really is. And this one guy that worked for the State Department, I believe, his name was William Blum, and he said that, you know, no matter how conspiracy-minded you are, that what the government is doing is actually worse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's somebody from within the system.
Right.
But, you know, that's the whole thing, though. It's like you have to be very discerning and willing to investigate things for yourself and not buy what anybody tells you, because it's like there's so many things out there in terms of like poisoning the well or, you know, just putting out flat out disinformation to kind of keep people off the path of what's like really going on. Right. So it's like it's also meant to discredit people that, you know, investigate these things too. So it's like, you know, like, oh, well, you know, this guy probably believes that there's, you know, reptilians running the world too. You know what I mean? Like shit like that kind of, I think, gets thrown in there to discredit like the whole entire thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe there are fucking reptilians running the world, but I don't, like, you know, I try not to buy into anything that I can't prove with like documented fact.
Well, and things like that, you know, reptilians or the parts of the government are working with aliens or the fucking flat earth, like all that shit. So what fucking bit of difference is that making in this fight right now? Like, all right, sure, the fucking earth turns out to be flat. Who fucking cares? It's not changing anything about what government's doing. There's just one more lie, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I always say. I'm like, it doesn't change what's going on the ground, man. Yeah. I'm like, you're looking in the entirely wrong direction.
Well, yeah. Are you gonna find out there's fucking aliens working with whoever? And so then you're just going to give up? I don't think so. If they're working to keep me oppressed, then I'm going to fucking shoot some aliens too.
Exactly. Yeah, well, see, the whole thing is that, and I see it a lot, like, you know, because I pay attention to, like, you know, how the way that, like, society is kind of, like, crumbling in a sense, and, like, things are becoming more, like the fringe is becoming more of the normal now, because it's like the pendulum is swinging harder in both directions. Yeah. So people are like grasping onto like more extreme ideologies as a result, like, you know, like because of like people like Antifa that like have like, you know, real hardcore left wing beliefs. There are people like that don't agree with that, so they'll go completely the other way. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a reactionary deal, and it's dangerous. Because it creates an environment for, you know, violence and people to be pitted against each other, because essentially that's what the rulers want. They don't ever want us to put down our differences and realize that, you know, if we all came together over a common cause, there's way, way more of us than there are of them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Follow the Roman Empire, but with Wi-Fi. And anything, you know, any fringe ideas, whatever's becoming normalized and whatnot, if it's not hurting anybody, who fucking cares? But the problem is, I think, people trying to force acceptance of those ideas on people who otherwise don't want to accept them, but aren't going to fucking stop you from doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's pretty much where I stand too, because it's like, like as long as you're not harming anybody, hold whatever fucking views you want. It's not my deal to tell you how to think.
Yeah. Yeah, regulation of speech and defense, and it's trying to take away everything that makes you an individual is the problem.
Yep. Yeah, I was talking to a guy the other day, and I was like, that's one of the main objectives of political correctness and things like that is to control speech, because if you can control the words that everybody has to use, then you can control the way that people think, because it's like it's censorship through limiting people's ability to express themselves through vocabulary and speech and everything. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you have people coming out now with like op-eds in like the fucking Wall Street Journal and things that are like saying that like free speech is dangerous. We need to do away with it. It's like, whoa, hold on a second here. Like,
I don't know if these people realize that that would happen to them as well. It's like, what are you even thinking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't. I don't think that they look at it. They're very short-sighted in that regard.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing with like censoring and like getting people deplatformed off social media. It's like they don't realize that it can come back around to bite them in the ass too. And it's the same thing with like a president. Like like say for example, like how Democrats or leftists wanted Obama to carry out a certain agenda and expand the power of government. Well, when it falls into the hands of Trump, who you don't like, he has those powers too. So it's like, hello, like you might want to be careful with what you're fucking asking for.
The fuck did you think was going to happen? Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
Speech is and people's reactions to supporting free speech are interesting because, God forbid, somebody say, "Well, that guy's a Nazi and he can talk," and then you're a Nazi supporter or any other extreme ideology, whatever. But Nazi seems to be the term that's thrown around the most. And I like the idea that sunlight's the best disinfectant. And whereas if you hide them, you make them hide. They just breed in the dark.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it's like not only that, but it kind of lends credence to it if you keep it in the dark, because it's like, okay, well, why don't they want anybody talking about this kind of thing? It's like must have some kind of legitimacy if people are keeping it like suppressed, even if it doesn't have any legitimacy. You know what I mean? It's just like kind of the whole Streisand effect of like how if you like try and say, oh, don't look over here, but then it draws people's attention to it.
Yep. Well, it's like, fuck, if you don't like what they're saying, you don't have to listen, you don't have to commentate on it, and you can absolutely make fun of them, talk shit, and make them look like an asshole.
Yeah, that's what free speech is all about. You know what I mean? It's like one person's allowed to say something, but it doesn't mean that the other people aren't allowed to come back and criticize it or combat it with their own point of view, because that's really what the free market of ideas is all about. It's like whoever has the best ideas really wins out in terms of like influencing other people's thinking. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on the whole thing. Like it's the same thing with like the KKK. Like I wouldn't want them operating in the dark, because it's like let them have their fucking rallies, let them look stupid. It's like I don't support it, but it's like they should have the right to do it, because it's essentially just going to discredit them. If you don't allow them to do that, then it's like it's just like we said, it breeds in the dark, and it's dangerous that way.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too that in the, I don't know, like what was it, Charleston, where people got killed, it wasn't either side of whatever protest going out and killing people. It was from the clash of people trying to silence each other, it seems. You can absolutely defend against violent people trying to kill people because of their ideology, but why light that fire? Why throw gas on the fire instead of memeing dumbasses who go out with tiki torches and who look hilarious, because that's really funny.
You're right. Exactly. I mean, that's really the best way, I think, is just just mock it, and like just like that's pretty much how I've always operated in terms of like when I operate on social media. It's like I'll just take things that I don't agree with, and I'll like satirically mock it, or just make fun of it. And I think that's why the left hates comedy so much, because it's such an effective weapon in terms of discrediting things.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it kind of seems that when people are trying to silence someone else's ideas, like you're saying, if it's not a good idea, then good ideas will win out. But when you don't have a good idea or you can't disprove what they're saying, you try to silence them, you're discrediting yourself.
Yep, exactly.
You
see a lot of that lately.
Yeah, you don't have any legs on what you're proposing to counter whatever you don't like. I think that's important. Like, I don't know, people I've seen, go on Facebook or social media and ask, well, I got offered an opportunity to go on this show that's a far right show or, white supremacist, Nazi, whatever, far left communist show, but I don't know if I should do it. What do you think? It's like, well, if you think it's a bad idea and you're going to go on the show, you better fucking be prepared to make them look stupid and to back up your points.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And I think that's one of the things that one of the shortcomings of people that have kind of a extremist like lockstep ideology where everybody has to buy into it or otherwise you're cast out kind of thing. And they like exist in echo chambers is because their ideology never gets challenged, so therefore they never have to strengthen their arguments, and it's like they're only kind of like circle jerking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like whenever they engage with somebody with a differing point of view, it's like they automatically outrightly reject it. And not only that, they just don't have any way or means of combating it because they've never had to engage in like a battle of wits with somebody else with a differing point of view.
Yeah, and in the age of X gets destroyed by Y videos, you go in and make yourself look like an asshole in a situation where you could make a bad idea look bad because it is. Then now you're on YouTube and everyone says, well, this guy's whole ideology is stupid because he fucked up here. So I don't know, you gotta be careful with your media appearances.
Yeah, when you can't even back up your own shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure. Cool. Well, fuck, man, that it's like almost an hour flying by really fucking quick. I'm gonna have to.
Oh wow!
I'm gonna have to cut us off here because I only have a certain amount of upload that I can do, but hopefully you can stick around for a minute and we'll do a quick after hours conversation. And if people want to see that, you can check out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up on the screen, patreon.com/thedankpodstash. So we're definitely going to have to do this again because that hour felt like about 5 minutes. So we got plenty more to talk about.
Yeah, for real, man. It did.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well,
thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll link anything, Anarchy Among Friends, anything else you have in the description for today's show, YouTube and all that. And people can find you if you want them to find you, find your projects.
I pretty much bailed on social media because I don't know. I'm trying to engage in real life and in terms of like activism and just living life.
Sure.
Because I feel that not only in my own personal life over the past 10, 12 years, I've seen myself kind of like slip into engaging more in a digital reality than the actual real world. And you can't exactly build the future you want if you're pouring a lot of attention and energy into something that's really not getting you anywhere. I mean, it's a good means to get your message out and get like if you have a podcast or a blog or whatever, you know what I mean? Use that as a platform to kind of like, get it out to an audience. It's good for things like that. But when you're investing so much time in it that you're not investing time in like, your own life and like things that you want to accomplish and goals that you want to, see come to fruition, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So I've kind of, for the time being, I've unofficially retired from the internet until I get everything in place that I want to, because I'm moving in 2 weeks, and then I got to get a job and I want to start building the future I want.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a good point. And when you get over on this side of the country, you'll have to hit me up. We'll do some stuff.
Yeah, definitely, dude.
Sweet.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing the episode with me. Thanks everybody listening for listening to episode 46 of the Dank Podstash, and make sure to check out the after hours, support the show, thedankpodstash.com and patreon.com/thedankpodstash, and we'll catch you next time.
Zombie presidents, what anarchy! Zombie presidents!